What's up, strongest men, women, and children from blocks all around the world? I am my block's strongest man, and tonight I have for you an extra special guest, the incomparable Jessica Fithen.
Ciao, homie.
Welcome back to My Block's Strongest Man, where we bring strongman into the mainstream by discussing all of the latest strongman events in the greatest analytic detail that you'll find anywhere on YouTube. If you haven't done so yet, subscribe to this channel. Make sure to comment below whether you agree or disagree with my videos. I love the engagement, and I respond to every single comment. Now on to today's topic. Going back to the record breakers a little bit, Dave Waters was paying out for the sandbag. He pays like every year until somebody defeats that record. First, what do you think of that idea? Is it a good idea? Second of all, should it be extended to the other record breaker events and to the women?
Wow, that's controversial. Let's just go for it, shall we? It should not be a controversial question. So the way that show was structured was that the men's sandbag was like $1,000 prize if they loaded $500 onto the platform. I think he's done it before, and that's like the game, and I don't think anybody else has ever loaded it, and so they just keep it, or it multiplies or something. I'm not really sure. The other record breakers should usually have some sort of connection to a prize cash pool or at least a really cool trophy or something like that. We are at the kind of the point now with the women's pro class to where we are starting to be able to I don't want to say the word demand. I don't like the word demand. We are starting to request strongly that the women's pro classes be treated a little more fairly with how we see other classes being treated. So if you're offering money for a men's record breaker, next year you need to offer money for the women's record breaker. It just has to happen. So we are slowly getting on board with making sure that, and again, we're not saying that we need to be treated like Thor. No one's asking for $100,000 for winning a show. It isn't that. There needs to be a certain amount of equal treatment kind of across the board for some of those things. That's just not happening yet. Promoters are by and far, I think, trying to change this. There are a lot of great promoters in Strongman. There are a lot of promoters that really do care about the women's classes. They know who they are. But I've had a lot of great talks with a lot of the promoters, including the one of Mammoth, who really does want to change kind of this landscape. It just doesn't happen quite as fast as we want it to. But the idea that, the winner of the Arnold Pro for the men gets like $85,000 or something in that range, and the winner for the women gets like $4,500, really? or $5 or something in that range. It's just not great. It's a little high of a disparity, and I'm trying to be very political in how I answer this question, but there needs to be a little more evening out, of these sorts of things. And Rogue is helping. They were offering money, cash prizes for the record breakers, $5,000, for those record breakers that we did, that sort of thing. So the pro class should not be a pay to play. This actually cost me twice as much as I'm ever going to recoup from it.
Right.
What's the point of a pro class if that's kind of how it's going? So there's a couple of pro shows, though, coming up this year that are really starting to change, I think, the landscape of that. Christina's doing a pro show, like you mentioned, here in Indiana. And then there's one called the Rainier Classic that's going to be out in Washington. And the winner of that show gets $5,000, the woman's winner, which is unheard of, absolutely unheard of. I think that's the most that I've heard offered a woman's class show. It's just an open show for pros, invite only, and the winner gets $5,000. Those are big, giant steps for us. And that I think they have 10 or 12 women already signed up for it. So the women are coming to these shows. They're showing up. They want to be involved. They're getting themselves there for these things. But it's kind of time that we stop treating the women as, we're just glad you're here kind of a deal. It's time that we start treating them like the athletes that they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's sad to hear that the disparity is that much currently. And like I said, for me, an impressive athlete is an impressive athlete. It doesn't matter,
Yeah, it's pretty big. And when you look at a lot of the other sports, there are some disparities. Clearly, the women in the WNBA get paid a lot less than the NBA, but there are sports where there are strength sports where the money is actually equal. A lot of people don't know that CrossFit pays their top athletes exactly the same. The men and the women get paid identically.
Oh, really?
the CrossFit Games, and they always have. They treat it's $250,000. First of all, I know I'm in the wrong sport, right? I don't like burpees, or else I'd be there. But
I don't either.
That's the only thing, right? But no, it's they pay the men and the women equally, and they always have. So that's not unheard of. And we just need to kind of start catching up with some of this stuff. So there are some shows this year that are really attempting to make a difference. And I have a couple of great talks with a lot of the promoters. Paul MOUSER is one that's really great. That he really cares about the women's class. But we've had lots of frank conversations about, the women shouldn't also be waiting for other people to change this. We should be doing it ourselves too. We should also be taking charge of this and creating shows and promoting ourselves. And I think we're really getting to the point now to where we've established ourselves, that we've proven a pro class at the Arnold is something that people like, that they want to see, that is successful, and it has been successful. Official Strongman Games has been very successful. And these are things that aren't theories any longer. These are things that actually exist. So now what do we do with it? How do we demand a more equal playing field and equal compensation for some of these things?
Yeah, I mean, this is really important to me because I have a 4-year-old daughter, and she needs to know that anything is possible. So that's why when I see stuff like Christina's show, I jump on it and say, "How can I help you?"
Right, that's amazing. And a lot of people have said that to me too. Actually, Lynn Morehouse, who runs Official Strongman Games, has a daughter, or he may have a couple of daughters. He has at least one daughter, and he talks to me a lot about her and about how she's very impressed with all the women, and she likes watching all the women compete. And these are people that are watching. These are people that, if we don't get things changed right now, if we don't actually continue this ball rolling, we are really setting up the next generation of strong women. We're setting them up for failure. Then they're going to have to fight. And where are we going to be in 10 years if we don't fix some of this stuff right now? So 10 years ago, there wasn't a women's pro class. There was barely a women's circuit at all. When Kristen Rhodes started, she was having to compete with the men because there literally was nowhere for her to be. Really? So that's how much it's changed since she even started. So we need to make sure in another 10 years that there's even less of a disparity, and that's up to us to do that.
Absolutely. So all that being said, would you return to Mammoth next year and try to break your own record?
I think so. Now that I've rekindled my on again, off again love affair with the block, anything is sort of possible. I really felt, I don't often feel this way, which is kind of funny. I really felt like I left some out there. I was actually, you're funny because you mentioned you thought I shot really high, and I actually thought I shot pretty low. Kale picked those numbers for me and it was fine, but I was like, no, I mean, the press definitely had a lot more. It's just a balance at the top. So all of that being said, I think absolutely, it'll be interesting to see if anyone else, kind of breaks it and how high they go, within the next year or so, and then kind of go from there.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because Gabby answered me the same way. She shot really high too. She beat the world record by quite a lot, and she told me the same thing. She's like, I jokingly asked Dave for a fourth attempt because I had more in the tank.
I felt the same way, and I really don't. The joke with me is that I've broken the log record twice. The first time I held it for like 5 minutes.
Wow, really?
It was the official Strongman Games, and they had a max log in the event. And I, on one of my attempts, the record was 250, which was Kristen's record. And such a fangirl that I am, I was actually the first one to break her record at 255. And then she came and did 265. I remember this like it was yesterday. So that one I literally held for 5 minutes. I was like, world record holder, take a picture, And then it happened again last year for Static Monsters. We did the log again, and I did 275. And then Danny Vahey in Texas did 285 4 hours later, and it was like, son of a bitch. So I've held the log record on 2 different occasions for like 4 minutes and like 4 hours. So that's like the big joke with me. So one day it will be longer than 4 hours. I just have hope. So long story short, though, like the thing with the block was like I actually felt like that was not my max. The log at that moment was my max. It absolutely was. I felt fine about that. The block is like, no, there's definitely more there. So it'll be kind of interesting, I think, to see what comes up with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of a question about mindset. I was just wondering, like, how do you approach competition events? Like, are you methodical like Brian Shaw? Are you like charismatic like Aaron Stone? Are you like yelling like Bill Kazmaier? Like, what's your approach?
I am funny enough, and you can probably tell this from my personality, I'm a people person and I really like people. And when I get nervous, I really like people. I talk a lot and I make a lot of jokes and I walk around a lot. And people are like, you're so relaxed at these shows. And I'm like, that's actually my anxiety and that's how I'm managing it. I have to kind of act like this is kind of just another day at the gym or else I overthink it. I'm always really impressed with the people that are like the screamers and like the back slappers and the ammonia and all that stuff. And I don't do any of that. I never have. Maybe an ammonia packet here or there for like the log once or twice, but like that is just not my style. It's I'm so lazy. It's like that's too much energy for me. It's just too much like to think about. So when I approach big lifts or things, I just calm myself down and I'm almost like people think I'm too lackadaisical. I'm like not aggressive enough. And I'm like, that's actually my personality when I do this. I don't want all of that. And it's just a different style of lifting. And I just, for me and managing my own stress and my own anxiety and stuff, I just won't, if I get all hyped up like that, I won't have anything left. So I do think there's some people have a problem with being overstimulated when they approach things, especially for medleys and stuff like that. But I definitely have nerves and I definitely get nervous, big stages and stuff, especially like the grand ballroom that we were allowed to be on at the Arnold Pro in front of Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yeah, there was a lot of nerves going on, but you know, those are all kind of learning experiences, but I'm just very, I put myself more in the methodical range to try to actually be very calm about it and not have to do all that, get all hyped up and that sort of thing. So it's fun to watch other people that do that type of stuff, but it just doesn't. I had somebody slap me once and it made me laugh and I was like, okay, this isn't gonna work. This isn't gonna work.
I had to do the same thing for this interview to remain calm. I had to pretend I was interviewing somebody with normal accomplishments.
Get together, so yeah.
So, what's your best event, as opposed to your favorite? Because I'll ask you that next, but maybe they're the same.
My best event is any kind of overhead, and that's kind of a funny thing. We recently just talked about that, and I don't have a bad overhead event. I definitely have ones that I'm better at. Funny enough, like my log is probably the highest that I do. I'm not particularly gifted at axle like Corey is for whatever reason. It's just funny the different changes. I've got pretty strong shoulders, so I think most overheads I can figure out. I like the awkward ones though. I like a block. I really like keg pressing just because it's stupid. It's stupid and it's very difficult to do. I think keg pressing is very hard, so I kind of like those. I'm actually not bad at like medleys, even though I don't like them. So like. We had a really long, awful medley for official strongman games last year, which was like 3 implements. You had to run 50 feet and then drag the sled back, and it was a banger. Like it was one of those vomity type things. I came in like 4th or 5th out of like, 15, 16 people, and I was like, what the hell? I'm not supposed to be good at these like running events or whatever. And they were like, no, you pretty much are. And it was like, so those were the ones that I'm like, I don't want to admit that I'm good at that stuff because then they'll make me do it more, So I definitely have bad events though, and I'm not even remotely trying to hide that. It's not possible. So I don't have very good grip, and most people know that about me. I work on my grip a lot. Now, okay, I don't have bad grip. I just don't have like super elite, like top of the chain, which is where, if you're messing with these people, you kind of have to be. So the most I've ever done, like on farmers, we had farmers at OSG, which were like 240 a hand. And I went like 80 feet with a turn. So that's like the most I've ever done, which doesn't sound that bad, but I've got women in my class that are like 300 a hand. So it's actually, I know, right? What's wrong with them? So not only do they have like 600-pound deadlifts, but they can also do like 300 a hand. So my grip is not bad as far as like normal people, but it's just not super elite. And so I'm not bad at like Hercules hold and stuff that's like stationary, but it's and I'm also better at frame than I am farmers. The farmers are just not my friend. They've never been my friend. It's just been bad for me from almost ever. So we work at it. It's one of those things that we just work at, but for whatever reason, it's just not been a strong point in my career. And most of the shows that I didn't place as high as I should have been affected by my grip. So, boo.
300 a hand is crazy. Like elite men are doing 350 a hand.
There's several of them. Like there's not just one person. I can name like 3 people off the top of my head that could do 300 a hand if it was in a show. So it's like, that's not normal.
It's crazy.
I say I have bad grip, but I'm like, that's not normal. It's not a normal thing. So,
hey, do you have any other records besides the Mouser that I should know about?
So I have the current Mouser block record, and then the log we tried for twice, which we did twice. And I haven't shot for anything else. The dumbbell is the next one coming up. There aren't really anything else that's like that intrigues me enough to kind of try. I'm not going to be Andrea Thompson with her deadlift on that's not going to happen. So the only other record, this is a joke, so no one take this seriously, but I would like to say that I have the most stone reps over a bar in any event that was ever done in strongman history at this point. Last year at the Arnold, if you weren't witness to the most ridiculous grueling event that ever existed, we did a 240 pound tacky free stone, like a last woman standing type event where I go and then you go, and then when you can't go, they put the next person in. It just keeps going. 34 reps later with a 240 pound tacky free stone with basically the worst cardio I've ever done I was like vomit. I was swallowing vomit during this event. So I think that's the most stone reps that anyone's ever done in an event, which is not a real record, but I'm going to claim it as such for this podcast.
You should. Is that Atlas or natural?
It's an Atlas stone, and it was tacky free, and I think they thought that the tacky free portion of it was going to be enough of a struggle for people, and it was for some. It wasn't super high rep for everyone, but it was an event that went on for like 32 minutes. It was supposed to take like 10 or something, and we were at the Arnold Pro. We were in the way of everything else, and there's lots of really fun live feed footage of me and mostly Danny Vahey going back and forth with this stone. You can see Jan Todd and Dion in the background, like freaking out with their watches and like the whole thing. And they're like, "How do we get them to stop?" And Danny and I are like, "I don't know, man. This is your event, and I'm just gonna keep going." So that's one of like beyond like the records. The block was fun, but that one I think is actually an event that really sticks out to me the most, just because of the absurdity of the whole thing, of how it just, people could not believe that we just kept going. And she got like 27 reps or 28 or something, so it was something stupid high too. But 34 reps with a stone over and over and over and over and over again is just crazy. It was just crazy, and it felt crazy doing it, and I was so glad when it was over. So it's not a real record, but it is tonight.
There's way crazier stuff in the Guinness Book of Records. That's a real record in my book.
That's what I said. We should have just submitted it to him anyways. Danny also holds the salmon toss record, which she stole from me.
I was going to ask you about that. Like, you actually have to toss a salmon? How did that come about?
The salmon, so Strongest Woman in the World was in Alaska, and they did a really cool job with Strongest Woman in the World. Strongest Woman in the World is a Strongman Core Pro show that's supposed to be international. So they held it in Norway, and we went to Norway one year, and then they held it in Alaska, and then it was supposed to be in Canada, but COVID screwed all that up. But we went to Alaska, and they had all these Alaska-themed events. They had kegs, and they had dog sleds, and then they had this ridiculous salmon that was not real. I know, PETA can calm down. It was actually rubber, and it was 55 pounds of a rubber salmon, and it had like this stupid like expression on its face. Which the pictures of it are my favorite pictures of any event I've ever done in my entire career of this stupid salmon toss. It was just silly. We were training. We had to make, Christina and I made this like silly replica salmon out of like pool noodles and chain, and we wrapped it up in a blanket, and we were like throwing it. We had to throw it like a two-handed shot put, so you couldn't like hammer throw it, mostly for safety, because they had the crowd really close to us. They didn't want 55 pounds of rubber hitting some children or something. That would have been very bad. Yes. But we got to throw this salmon for max distance, and you had to throw it just like a shoulder pass, like a shot put, basically, with two hands. And that's probably my favorite event, just because of how the crowd loved it. The fish like flops all around. You couldn't really train for it, but I think the salmon was supposed to be like a replica of the biggest salmon that they'd ever caught in Alaska. They're very proud of the whole thing.
That's way harder than what I thought you had to do. I thought you grabbed it by the tail and like flung it.
You could probably, I think they do the Highland Games in Alaska sometimes, and they use it for that too. And I think those women are allowed to do that. They're actually trained to throw it that way though, and they do it in a field. We were in the state fair on like, I don't want to say a parking lot, but cement in like the middle of the state fair with people like walking by, and they really did not want people like dropping it or like flinging it into the crowd. Like that would just, you could have hurt somebody. So they figured if you had to throw it like a shot put, that it would reduce that. So Danny got me by like a foot or something. We really cleaned up the day. It was hilarious. That we both had a really good time throwing this fish, but it was me and Danny, and we have a long-standing feud over who has the biggest salmon toss. She actually has a fake salmon over her barbell like set up in her gym right now. If you ever look at her videos, she's great fun. So
oh, that's funny. Yeah, I mean, what I read was you threw it 14 feet, and now that I know how you threw it, that's really impressive.
Yeah, harder, right? 55 pounds for 14 feet is actually really far. And the videos for it are just a lot of fun. It flops all around, and and people were just like laughing and stuff. And so when that event first came out, it was just hilarious. We had a bunch of videos of like how we were going to train for it, which is not very well. You can't really, but the crowd loved it, and that was probably the most like true strongman event where you can't train for it. It's some weird implement. It's silly. It's related to the culture of where you are. So that one to me, that specific event for a bunch of different reasons is probably the most memorable.
Awesome. All right, cool. And then my last question is just take this opportunity to tell everybody how they can follow you, anything you'd like to promote, sponsorship, anything.
Sure. So my Instagram, which is full of terrible training videos, basically, don't get too excited over that. It's see, I'm very motivational, is filthy_Fithen, which is Fithen. And then you look like a man is all of those words with periods in between. So it's you period, look like a man period with periods in between. Those are my two main social media accounts that I'm on. And so if people want to get in contact with me, those are the best ways to do it.
All right, cool. And if I go start liking posts on You Look Like a Man, that doesn't mean I encourage that sort of behavior, does it?
No. It's funny when you have kind of a negative, like an account that's like that. People are like, I'm liking this post, but not because I like it, but because So we get the whole thing. It is kind of a funny thing, but we talk about a lot of interesting stuff on there sometimes.
All right, cool. So once again, thank you for spending all this time with me. We talked about so many interesting things. My audience is going to love it. And thanks once again. Maybe we'll do it again sometime after your next comp.
Absolutely. I appreciate it very much. Thank you for having me on.
Awesome. Have a great night.
You too.
All right, thanks. So if you like this video and haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing using that button right there. And also stay tuned for some other videos that you might love blooping up right there. This one is the one that YouTube thinks that you will like the best, and this one is the one that I think you will like the best. As always, share this with everyone, and until next time, ciao, homie.